Now, let me start with one item, just to remind everybody. The council meeting for this month was moved up to December 12th, I think it is. Hold on.
Correct,
Yeah,
Arthur.
December
December
12th, so
12th.
that we can accept your procedures for this year and have 30 days until the next meeting, which will be regularly scheduled in January, that will be voted on. So your job today is to finalize the regulations, procedures that you will be sending for our introduction a week from Thursday. Will not be approved. That comes in January after the required 30 days. So
That's
get
correct.
on,
And
get on with your
thank you.
job. And
Okay,
I
thank you,
will
Arthur. We
turn
appreciate
myself off.
Well, no, you should always feel welcome to answer any questions we have. Thank you for
I'll be
being
here.
here.
I'll be here
Okay,
spiritually.
okay. And we've got the recording going again. Welcome to everyone. Thank you all for being here. And thank you to the committee members for looking over this document and giving it good care. This meeting is being recorded and is now in session. First item on the agenda is some administrative stuff. Let's start with the approval of the minutes. And again, thank you very much, Elizabeth, for tackling the minutes. It's always a chore. Are there any amendments or changes to the minutes from any of the members? All right, hearing none. Can we have a motion to approve the minutes, please?
I make a motion.
Larry Mose, who seconds?
I second.
All in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, we're good to go. I'm going to try to see if I can get my video working. I'm not sure I can, but if I can, I will. In the meantime, other administrative items. The only other one I have on my list is the invitation we had from the Ethics Committee about attending an ethics training. And I sent that all to you when the committee sent it to me. No need to decide that tonight. There is no requirement that we attend it. But you can see the class materials for it on the Ethics Committee page on the village website if you want to look at the materials. Just let me know sometime soon whether you want to attend that, because I did promise that we would get back to them about how many attendees, if any, we would have from our committee. Any questions about that proposed ethics training? Okay,
I got a question.
yes, go ahead. Yes, Elizabeth.
Maybe Katie could answer. Has this been offered to the council members or anyone else yet?
Yes, yeah. I've been through this training, I believe, once or twice before. So yeah, it's something just offering all of the committees, and they have a program. It's quick. It's mostly just little scenarios of ethical situations and things to be aware of. But yeah, we've been through
Yeah,
it.
and I've done it as Katie at least twice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Did you have to
So-
go back to remedial school, Arthur?
Yeah.
Yes, we do. But you don't need, unlike the Open Meetings Act, you don't get a certificate that's suitable for framing.
Okay. Anything else on administrative items from anybody? Okay, let's proceed to our primary and main order of business, which is going through the election regs. The document that we're working from is the one that was approved by the council in January 2024. And I again thank all the committee members for their care in going through and doing markups and whatever. And my plan here is to just walk through it section by section. You all have the document. It was in the packet. And I think that at the end, we should probably cut back and look at those 9 items that the last year's committee recommended that the council address, just to make sure we didn't miss any of those. But let's just walk through the document section by section. And Elizabeth, we'll need you to record the votes here, because we are required to actually take a committee vote on anything that we change from the document that the council approved in January 2024. Everybody
Okay.
clear on the process? Okay, let's start with section 1, Roman numeral 1, purpose. And there was an issue there because previously in 22 and 23, that language said that the purpose of these regulations is to implement, is to Provide for free and fair elections in the Village of Barnes additions and ensure that all qualified voters are able to freely exercise their right to vote. That was the language in the preceding years. That was the language last year's committee adopted, although I think they said free and independent rather than fair and free or whatever, fair and independent. Anyway, it's essentially the same. And then in January, the council deleted that and replaced it with what you see in front of you, which basically says the purpose of these regulations is to comply with the regulations, which is pretty vacuous in my personal opinion. So, committee comments. We could, in fact, combine the two statements in some way, but Elizabeth, go ahead.
Okay. I remember when that was put in back, I don't know if it was a year ago or when we were going through the regulations, maybe more than a year ago now, a couple. And I felt that that was a very powerful statement to have in there because to me, it is equivalent to a guardrail. A guardrail for the election officers who are carrying out the process as a reminder of their duty and responsibility to the residents of VMA to guarantee that the election process that they're going to do is fair, is accurate, transparent, free from internal or external influence, and that this is it serves as a reminder, because if it isn't there, it's just, it's just go do the job. But the idea is, I think election committee to me has a very particular function that's different from some of the other committees. I mean, maybe you could say it's also because the charter says that it will conduct the election, but it's different because it has an official responsibility to do this and to do this in a very particular way. So all I can say is that I think the guardrail is important. I don't think it is a delusion of grandeur that if that created some kind of offense, whoever was reviewing it, that's not the purpose. I think it's really just to say that we agree, we commit to making sure that this is going to be the most efficient, fair, transparent process. And we're doing this on behalf of the voting residents of VMA and all the residents. So that is what I feel about the reason why it should stay, where I would like it to stay. Happy to hear what you think.
Other committee members' comments on that.
What I think it is purely a mission statement.
That's right, and that both of you, I think, are right.
Mission
And-
statement,
And
period.
that's always useful to have right up front.
Exactly.
Larry, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think that we have seen mistakes and bias situations occurring that this statement does not protect against. And I think that it really should read the purpose of these regulations is to provide for fair and independent elections and to implement the election provisions of the village charter and code. But I think that statement, the whole purpose of the election committee is to make sure that the elections are fair and independent. And to not state this here is ludicrous.
Could we say, Larry, would you be comfortable with a statement that said the purpose is to provide fair, independent, and unbiased elections, or fair, unbiased, and independent? With that language,
That's fine. That's fine.
putting the word unbiased in there might be useful.
Okay, and to implement the election provisions of the charter,
Yeah,
etc.
yeah, we can combine that. I think it's easy to combine these two. The way that I would recommend doing that is to say the purpose of these regulations is to implement the election provisions of the village charter and code in order to provide for fair, unbiased, independent elections in
No,
the village of
Marty.
Barnes.
Marty, don't.
Yeah, go ahead.
That's a mistake
Okay, tell me why.
because you need a clear statement here that our purpose is to provide for fair, unbiased, independent elections.
Put that first
Yeah, absolutely.
and
And it's
then
not a
say,
qualifier.
gotcha, gotcha. I understand the distinction. Good point. All right.
While we're doing some editing, instead of saying provide for, I would say ensure.
Okay. I think that's anybody object to that change?
Oh, that's excellent.
So to ensure free and independent or fair and independent elections in the Village of Martin's Additions and ensure that all qualified voters are able to freely exercise their right to vote, and to implement the election provisions of the village charter and code.
Well, that's fine.
Does that sound good to everybody?
Yeah,
All right, we need a motion, please, to adopt that amendment.
I make
Yes, I
that
do.
motion.
I second
Second,
that.
all in favor of amending the purpose statement in section 1, please say aye.
I,
Any opposed? Okay, and I've got notes on how to word that, so thank you. In terms of our process as a committee, we're gonna walk through the document tonight. Then I, as your noble chair, will put together the markup for you to review administratively in a day or two. And then we'll prepare that packet to send off to the council. Okay, so we've got that. On Roman numeral 2, the village council election process. A number of people had some notes there. Nothing in, I have no notes on paragraph 1 there. The first notes I have are on paragraph 2. Does anybody have any changes in paragraph 1? Okay, no, hearing none.
Well, wait a minute. Let me ask you a question.
Sure.
What I'm looking at, I don't see a oh,
There's a number.
so
It's-
you're saying we have moved now to paragraph 2. Is that right?
Yes, under
right.
Roman numeral 2, the village council election process, it's paragraph 1, paragraph 2. I don't see any markup or changes from anybody on paragraph 1. So moving to paragraph 2 in that section, there were 4 different notes that people had. And the very first one in line, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, is the certify the village's supplementary voter roll. You see this little numeral 1 in brackets there? And there
Yeah.
were several of our members had real questions about that word supplementary, which Ron Bolt apparently added last year. It was not in any previous regulations. I went all the way back to 2015. And it was always just said the voter roll, the VMA voter roll, the village voter roll. Never had the word supplementary. And I know a couple of you had concerns about that word. And Arthur, you remember I found it confusing last year, and you were kind enough to go back to Ron Bolt to try to get some explanation of what the heck he meant by that. And I'm going to open it up. Committee members, do you have anything to say about the word supplementary there?
So what did he mean by that?
He said that that was his way of referring to the entire voter roll, although it doesn't sound like that.
No.
And that the village voter roll, yes, we had to verify the entire village voter roll. That was my question, not just some supplemental part of it. We have to verify the whole voter roll as a committee. But he said it was supplemental to the state and county voter roll. And that's how he used the word supplementary.
Okay.
Any municipal voter roll is supplementary to the state and county voter rolls.
That's Marty, I think that's my memory too. And it was that the voter roll is what the state via the county supplies to us. Our amendments to that are supplementary. So that's the reason for that wording. It's a simple issue. And the vocabulary that's been chosen for it is, specific technical vocabulary that has no other meaning to it. So that's, as I recall, that's the intent and meaning.
Well,
Elizabeth?
my question is, does it need to be there at all? Because the voter roll has to be clean, and at the local level, we're in the best position to be able to certify that even the state and county, I suppose, rolls are, I mean, the information in Martin's Additions would probably be more up to date, to be able to, in other words, you wouldn't want to depend on the county and state, absolutely. So it just seems to me we have to go through the process that we do to have to ensure that it's up to date. So I just don't see,
Yeah,
I'm
Elizabeth.
questioning why the word is there at all, that's all.
Because if you don't have the supplementary word in, then you are referring to the voter roll is what the state via the county supplies us, which is
Oh,
inadequate.
that-
To have the village's supplemented voter roll, you have to identify it in some way. You could call it the village roll, you could call it the with a capital THE voter roll, but you want to
Oh.
separate it in some way from the one that is supplied to us.
So could you just
It's
say
a name.
the village's voter roll?
You could say that. I suppose, I don't see there's any other. There's probably, I don't know that the word supplementary has any other meaning.
Well, one of the rules of good regulatory writing, which I did for 20 years in the federal government, is to be clear, not to use confusing terminology if it's not necessary, to really be as clear and precise as possible. So it sounds like we might be able to say, instead of the village's supplementary voter roll, we could just say the village's voter roll. In other words, strike the word supplementary. What do my committee members think of that? All right, can we have a
I'm with-
motion to?
Well, I'd like to, couple of things. When Ron Bolt was discussing, he made some reference to the fact that the state law says that or mentions the county voter roll is the also the state voter roll. Okay.
That's true. That's correct.
Okay, but we have identified, so first off, we are in, other than the law that specifically requires us to use that county voter roll, there is nothing that says we can't supplement it or use other things. And our
Correct.
charter says that a person who is not on the state or county voter rolls, but is a resident here, has the right to vote here. That makes the fact that the village voter roll is totally different from the county voter roll. They are not the same. And the word supplementary in here, whereas everywhere else in the charter, our charter, and these words, we don't use the word supplementary regarding voter roll, is totally confusing. What's really important is it's not confusing to this election committee, but what about 5 or 10 years from now, when people are looking at this to understand? There is no supplement. The village voter roll is a combination of the county voter roll and those people who are not on that roll that are villagers that have the right to vote.
Resident.
And it's our job to certify that village voter roll.
Mhm.
I think that was very clearly stated. Thank you. So we need a motion, if you wish to make such a motion, to remove the word supplementary and say the village or villages, plural, possessive, the village's voter roll. Does anyone want to make that motion?
I'll make it. I move that we remove the word supplementary and replace it with the village's voter roll.
I'll second it.
All right, all in favor, please say aye.
I,
Aye. All right, that's a unanimous 4-0.
Marty, I have one request here. Not sure whether the word supplementary has any separate legal meaning that we run this by. Well, we will do it when we introduce it and discuss it, whether the word supplementary has any special legal meaning that we're unaware of.
Yeah, the
Well,
question here, when you give it to Ron to look at, is whether that word is necessary.
Right.
And
And I don't believe it is, but, yes,
But
Larry?
I think you're right that that separating the identity from the official one that is transmitted to us and the one that is used, what we do is supplement that. So Larry, you're not quite right. We supplement technically the role that's sent to us. We do not have an independent one. So legally we are supplementing it, but I'm not sure whether that word has any specific legal meaning.
Arthur, I don't want to argue with you, but
Neither, I don't want to argue either.
I
This is
know, but
a legal
but
question.
but your statement is not accurate. We are required to maintain an accurate village voter roll. That village voter roll consists of those people of record on the county voter roll. Those people who, according to our charter, are not on the county voter roll, but live here, are 18 and have a right to vote. It's not a supplementary voter roll. It is actually the official village voter roll.
Mhm.
I'm not going to argue this point. I
Yeah,
think this is a
so,
point for
and by the
lawyer.
way, if Ron would like to take a position otherwise, I would ask that you have him provide citings for the parts of the law that he's going to refer to. I
I-
want to read them.
not being a lawyer and not being familiar with the county and state code, I cannot do that, but we'll ask Ron.
Yeah, Ron can provide the citations. I think that's a good point, and I
Does it-
concur with that request. Anybody else? Yes. Elizabeth, go ahead.
You're going to take Susan. She had her hand up first.
Oh, I'm sorry. Susan, how could I have missed you? Go ahead, please.
Peter, is your computer working? Mine seems not to be
Okay, uh,
Thank you both for being here. I hope that you can work out the technical problems.
your interfamily issues should be done offline.
Thank you again, Susan and Peter, both for being here. All right, there's Peter. Hi, Peter.
Hey there.
And there's Susan. Hi, both of
Yes.
you. Thank you for
Okay.
joining us.
I don't see myself. I must not exist.
You're looking good,
Okay,
both
there
of
we
you.
There I am.
Okay. Hi. What I was gonna say, because I couldn't get my audio to work. I don't know what's going on. Anyway, that's all right. I was just gonna say that you could include the kind of explanation that Larry just gave that kind of combines what Arthur said also, that, you know, you could say that the county and state voter roll is supplied to the VMA. The VMA voter roll is a combination of that voter roll supplemented with additional residents who are not on those rolls, who are also residents of VMA and are 18 and older, et cetera. Subsequently, in this document, we will be using the term VMA voter roll to refer to our village voter roll that consists of a combination of those two items.
Not
In other
bad.
words, you could
Not
use
bad.
that term supplementary at the very beginning to explain, you know, if you want, if that was important to some of the people.
That's a great idea, Susan. And in fact, so you know, it's Peter's fault that your voice thing was wrong on your computer. We all know that.
Mm.
It's always his fault.
Elizabeth, go
Yeah.
ahead.
I was going to say, before Susan spoke, I was going to suggest a footnote if it becomes an insoluble problem, as a simple footnote at the bottom, if they do such things in a regulation that explains just that it's the sum total. The village voter roll is the sum total of the county roll plus the VMA regulations on who can vote, right? So
Right.
right.
And you
so-
can indeed, knowing as regulatory writing as I do, you can indeed drop a footnote here that says that.
Okay,
so
because
let's-
then you could take out the word supplementary, but just put a footnote on voter roll that explains that it's the-
Exactly.
you know, it's
The combination
county
of the
plus
two.
the supplemental data provided by VMA according to their
Right.
own regulations, right?
Right. Can we have a committee vote on that to add a footnote explaining what the voter roll consists of? Anyone want to make a motion to add such a
I make a
footnote?
motion.
Larry moves. Is there a second?
A second.
All right, Nomi seconds. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right, we have unanimously adopted a footnote of explanation. And I'm happy to draft it accordingly to what you all just said. I think that is helpful. All right, still in paragraph 2 of section Roman numeral 2. The next comment I have here from anybody is about, it's number 2, conduct the public election forum. The Ron had apparently inserted the word if any. That was back because the January 24 version of these regs from the council said that the forum was suddenly optional. It had been mandatory the previous couple of years. And so striking the way, if the committee votes later on in this document to make the forum mandatory, and we did discuss that at our November meeting, and it was unanimous then to make it mandatory, then the phrase "if any" has to be removed here. because there would always be a mandatory quorum. So that is just sort of editorial cleanup. And we can vote now on whether or not we think that the forum should be mandatory, or we can wait till the forum section later, but might as well vote for it now. So does anyone want to discuss the mandatory forum versus optional forum? Again, in November, the committee members voted unanimously to make the
Mhm.
forum mandatory. We need a formal motion
just-
tonight if we want to do that.
Yeah.
What, say it again, we need a formal what?
We need a motion tonight to make the forum mandatory so that we can strike the phrase "if any" there
Oh,
where you
what?
see the little note 2. Because then it would
I
go-
make a motion to make it mandatory. Optional is not optional.
And just strike the word, strike the word if any, or whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
Correct. Do we have a second on Naomi's motion?
Second.
All right, all in favor of striking the words "any" and making the forum mandatory, please say aye.
I,
Any opposed?
Aye.
No. Okay, 4-0, the word "if any" comes out and the forum is mandatory. Okay. All right, going to note 3.
Excuse me, one.
Go ahead. Yes, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Just wanted to say that was also discussed at the last council meeting, I believe also. There was a discussion there of the election forum, and some of us had an opportunity to provide justification at that time. So, that point of view I think was heard, hopefully.
Yes, I think that you and Larry both did a beautiful job
Uh-huh.
of explaining just how important that is.
it was-
Truly, you
yeah.
did.
It
Thank
was
you.
just
Katie.
that, I mean, it just meant so we didn't have to repeat the same thing in this meeting.
Correct. So we have another unanimous vote here to make the forum mandatory again, which is what it was in the past, and to strike the phrase "if any" in that line. Okay, the next section I had, or the next note I had there, is going down to the following line. Says prepare and authorize the ballots subject to council approval for absentee balloting. And that phrase certainly struck me, and I think some others, as very odd, because the council doesn't need to approve absentee balloting when you have a universal mail vote, as we've now had for 5 years, and would presumably continue to have under these regulations. And even if we went back to in-person voting, absentee ballots are not an option. The state law, as I read it, section 33, I believe it is, of the state election law, says that you have to have absentee ballots to ensure voting rights for all voters. That goes back to the purpose statement about be able to freely exercise your right to vote. So I have no idea why that phrase, subject to council approval for absentee balloting, was inserted. Arthur, would you care to address that? Or Katie, do you know why that was in there? Because it seems totally irrelevant.
Probably historical, drawing on historical memory. I have no specific
Probably true.
reason.
Katie, any idea why you would say that? Since you always have to have absentee balloting
No,
available.
I have no idea. I think it's just was there.
Well,
So
this is more housekeeping cleanup than anything else then. I mean, again, one of the rules of regulatory writing is you don't put in unnecessary phrases, especially ones that don't make sense. So do we want to have a motion here for our committee to strike that phrase, subject to council approval for absentee balloting?
Elizabeth?
Yes, I
Yeah.
move that.
I second.
All right, we have a motion, a second. All in favor of striking that odd phrase, please say aye.
I,
All opposed? Okay, 4-0. Thank you
Uh,
for that.
A
Yes.
quick in between right now. I found the note from Ron Bolt that describes the election roll and the supplementary. I'm about to send an email to forward it to everybody. But
Oh, that,
his main point is that state law does not expressly state that a municipality can have its own list. Rather, it suggests that a municipality cannot do so. And he says the state law does not expressly authorize the village to certify or make any changes to the state list. Therefore, I found it useful to clarify that point in the regulations. The local, anyway, I'm sending this out to you, and this is the reason for the word supplemental here. So you'll get
Thank
it.
you for finding that, Arthur. That's
You'll
helpful.
get it in your mailbox within seconds.
Thank you. Larry,
Possibly.
Larry, want to
Well,
respond?
But you're still asked that Ron provide the actual sightings. And I don't mean a little phrase or footnote at the bottom. I mean the actual wording of those,
The full citation.
the full citation. I don't have Nexus Lexis. I don't have the ability to go pull that stuff out.
Larry, without knowing, it could be that it doesn't provide for it because doesn't mention it. So it could be that there is no authorization because it's not there. This is just a
Well-
guess, pure guess on my part. I have
Yeah,
no
but
idea for this.
that's not true. You know, when one of the things about the freedom of of our Constitution is that the government is allowed to instruct you on what to do to a limited extent. And those things it doesn't state, you have freedom to do. So to make that interpretation is just counter.
Larry, I don't know. That was just
constitutional.
a
That's
pure
ridiculous.
supposition.
Nobody,
Don't argue with me. I'm not, this is not
Gotcha.
an argument. It was something I pulled out of the air.
Yeah. Well, the committee has voted to strike the word supplementary,
Right.
and include an explanation of using the phrase, why it's considered in some way a supplemental voter roll to the county voter roll. And so the council will have an opportunity to look at that footnote and see if that explains it adequately. But we have had a committee vote on the wording there, and I think that it'll be helpful to see that note from Ron. So thank you, Arthur, for sending that along. Just to be really clear, I mean, when we're talking about the village voter roll, we were talking about a specific document, a legal document, in fact. And I know that I've read the state regs long enough and thoroughly enough to know that, in fact, the state regulations do require municipalities to verify their voter rolls by implication, because they prohibit the municipalities from sending ballots for municipal elections to people who are not residents or who have died or whatever, moved away. And so that prohibition is very clear in the state law, and that certainly implies that a municipality must clean up its municipal voter roll before it sends out municipal ballots. So, that part of the law I'm very familiar with, and it'll be interesting to see. Again, the fact that the word supplementary is so confusing in there does need to be addressed, because regulations should be clear and understandable. Okay, anything else on
Marty?
that? Yes, Larry,
Marty?
go ahead.
yeah, well, just to be sure we're all on the same page here. If this is going to be discussed at the village council meeting, I would really appreciate if we could see those written citations prior to the meeting, so that we're not floundering around at the meeting, having had no opportunity to look at the stuff and consider it and research it.
That's a very good point procedurally, Larry. Let me follow up on that right now. One of the things I had on my notes for this meeting is to coordinate with Arthur, our coordinator, and of course we've got Katie here too, thank you, about timing on this, because we will submit, our committee report and the recommended election regs to the council before the December 12th meeting, preferably by Monday the 9th, so that you have time to read through it. Although most of the sections have no changes, but that's, our timetable. So our next committee meeting is the first Monday in January, which I believe is January 2nd or 3rd. Let me look at it. Let me look at January. Yeah, it's January 6th. And the council meeting is January 16th. There's only 10 days between those two. So Arthur, here's my question to you and somewhat to Katie as well. If the council has any comments or questions about the draft we send you next Monday, a week from today, can you get them to us by December 30th so that we have time to review them and consider them before our meeting on January 6th? Is that doable?
Probably not.
Probably not.
Probably not. I think what the procedure will be is that you will send this to the committee. It will be reviewed and discussed at the next council meeting, and there will be changes made or accepted or not made at that time. Katie, is that kind of your understanding?
Yes, Arthur, that's my understanding as well. I mean, and also that week, a lot of us will be out and traveling and the height of the holidays, so, but I will encourage, the council members, my colleagues, to review, after the December meeting, and to try, if they have any questions or back and forth with you, to at least, um, be respectful and give that to you so that you're not like blindsided, okay? So we will work together on this, but I don't think December 30th is a workable deadline right now.
Okay, Katie, thank you. That's very helpful. Let me
But
go
I
back.
will
I'm looking at.
encourage, I will tell them to review and do their homework, but I don't know if I can promise that deadline. Yeah.
How about, I mean, I agree that that's like, Christmas holiday, New Year's weekend, that week is really hard for all of us, including the committee members.
Right.
But, you will have it probably on the 9th of December and can introduce it at the 12th meeting on the 12th. That's fine. That's a straightforward process. And from between the 12th and the 20th or 23rd or 22nd, or even, I mean, would it be reasonable? I think so, but let me ask you, since you're both here, to ask the council members to get back with us with any concerns by the 20th. Yeah, they'll have it on the 9th. They'll introduce it on the 12th. Can they get back to us with comments by the 20th? That's before everybody leaves town for the holidays. Is that doable?
I will certainly ask and encourage that. They, yeah, I'll ask and encourage that. I will, I can do that. And I don't want any gotcha moments as much as you do. So I'll see what they say and what they'll do, but I would like everybody to review it as, right when it's introduced, and that, it's a smooth process going into January. That's my hope. That's my wish. That's what I'm encouraging. So
That would be terrific if we could have the council members' comments. I mean, it could be just individual comments. It doesn't have to be consolidated like it was last year. By the 20th of December, that's a Friday. Then it's what, 12 days, 11 days, 8 days after it's 2 weeks basically after the introduction, or after we give it to you. So let's aim for the 20th. And Katie, thank you very much for your help with that. Arthur, you're our official liaison. I hope you'll give Katie some backup and.
Yeah, oh yeah. But I think the point is that this is for you, the process is this. You submit your proposal, the council reviews it, makes any changes, amendments, and hears from the community. That this is the reason for the at least 30 days.
yeah,
Right.
there's that too.
And then we vote on it.
Yeah.
Right.
It's kind of not a negotiation or deliberation process. You submit it, it's reviewed, it's voted on.
That is technically the way it should work, yes. But as you recall last year, Arthur, there were some errors in what the council gave us back on the January 4th memo that you sent last year's committee. Eliminated replacement ballots, for example, by getting the dates wrong. There were some things that the council had sent us that were simply not doable. And you very kindly, you as the council members, corrected those mistakes. And so having the election committee get your feedback sooner so that we can catch anything that's a technical error like that. I mean, it saves embarrassment for one thing in public meetings. And it's also, I think, a very important courtesy to the committee that has worked hard to really try to develop very clear regulations. So it really is a better process than, as Katie said, we don't want anybody blindsided here. And last year, I think the committee felt a little surprised by what we got back from the council on January 4th. And thank goodness we had it on January 4th, that we didn't just see that suddenly at the January council meeting, because we were able to, like I say, prevent some embarrassment there for the council members. So the process here, I think, can be more collegial and should be so. And Katie and Arthur, I want to thank you both for trying to make that happen this year. Anything else on this from any of the members or anybody else? Peter, Susan, you're also welcome to speak up on this if you want to. You don't have to. Anybody else? Okay, so we have a procedural agreement here, and I've noted the request from the committee and the council chair's commitment and our liaison's commitment to try to make that collegial process work. All right, carrying on. Okay. The fourth item here on the notes I have from various committee members is about an omission that was in the regulations that the committee sent the council last year, but that the council removed. And it was a phrase that said that in the list of the various duties that the election committee has, the council approved the list of duties, but took out one sort of central management responsibility, which was to manage and direct the coordination of the election process with the election service contractor. And that is, of course, a major material component of the election management process. So my question to the committee is, do you want to have a vote to put that phrase back in as one of our duties, managing and directing the coordination of the process with the service contractor? Michael and I did that jointly last year, and it worked quite well. So, I don't know that we need to have a long discussion about it. It's a question of whether or not we reinsert that phrase. Committee members, want to weigh in on this?
I'll weigh.
Liz?
Yeah, I think it goes back to the word independent in the purpose statement that I was thinking about how best to describe that. If you think about a jury trial, and the attorneys for the plaintiff and the defendant review and select the jurors, but once the trial starts, the jurors have to do their job, and they have to be, sometimes they're sequestered with the idea that not to be subject to external influences or whatever while they're doing their deliberations. But I mean, they have their orders, they have their instructions, they have their rules, and they have to follow through with it. So it's just that it's that idea of independence, and it's a very straightforward process. It's very regulated, it's documented, it's it's rules basically. And there's and then there's also an efficiency aspect to it also, that it should be as expedient as possible, because all of the decisions that have to be made are on a tight deadline. And the more people involved in that process, there's always a chance for slowing things down and missing your deadlines. So that's what I would like to comment on it, at least today. I think it's related to the concept of independence to do the job.
Elizabeth, I'll pick up, even though I don't fully like your analogy, I'll pick it up. A jury does not have the opportunity to get the police to go out and investigate, to question a suspect about some facts that may not have been picked up in the first instance. They deal with what they've got. So they're independent, but they don't have full authority to do things. And I would just remind the committee that your remit this year was to take the regulations from last year, change the dates, deal with some minor details, and not make any other changes. If you insist on putting this in, I will tell you that the end result will be to piss off the council. So I suggest not including it. It's been turned down in the past. It goes beyond your remit, and it will not be effective.
I would say not to piss off the council, but I just don't think it does not have the majority of the council support. I'd rather say that, but at this point.
All right,
Larry has his hand up.
Larry, proceed.
Yeah, this goes to the heart of the issue here. Why have an election committee? The primary issue is to have these fair, independent elections. Arthur can say that he prepares a mandate of instructions to us, and that's all we're allowed to do. But it doesn't say that anywhere in our charter or anywhere else. It's our responsibility to make sure things are being done ethical. It's our responsibility to inform the council when we see things that are not actually ethical, that are biased to the incumbents in office and to the control that really shouldn't maybe be there. The power of the council is to ensure that things are fair and they're done right, not to put themselves in a position that you're suggesting by eliminating this wording. This wording is accurate, it's not excessive, and it belongs in the procedures. So, frankly, trying to intimidate by saying it's going to piss people off is one, insulting, and just proves again that people, when they get in power, and look how stupid, silly, petty this is. A little weeny village of 300 some odd people. Are you kidding me? Who needs power here? And who needs to get pissed off? To be reminded by your people who are trying to be ethical that you're not doing as good a job as could be done. You know, if you hear it every darn year. That's what we should be telling you. And I move that we add this phrase back into the procedures.
Thank you, Larry. Is there a second? I will second it. All in favor of reinserting the phrase that was removed last January, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, I hear no opposition. We will reinsert the phrase with an explanation as to why we consider that important. And it is indeed, I have to concur with Larry here. Our job as a separate legal body, chartered, in the charter, established by the charter to run fair elections, is to in fact alert the council when something is not appropriate. I think that is part of our duty. And I also think it's, of course, part of the council's duty to make sure we have fair and accurate election regs. And I know that Katie and Arthur both have worked hard to make sure we do. So we would appreciate your support on why this piece of our responsibility is in fact significant and is it's routine. It should be routine. I'll leave it at that unless Nomi wants to add anything, or Peter or Susan. Katie, do you want to add anything? Peter has a hand up. Peter,
Yes.
go ahead.
It seems to me that the council, if they insist on doing something that seems unreasonable to the members of the committee and to many members of the village as well, that they have an obligation to explain fully their rationale for putting the council staff, the village staff, in the middle of the activities of the village, of the election committee. It doesn't seem reasonable to me. There's a need for independence here. There's an issue of bias. We're dealing with a a at-will employee of the council, and there's no clear need for it. So I think that when the council does this, it would be very helpful if they made a point not of merely exercising their power to do as they wish, but instead to persuade and explain to the community why it is that it is very important to them that the staff be inserted into the middle of this issue. So that we've gone on over this repeatedly. There has never really been an explanation offered to the community on this issue. And I think it's about time that if you want to do something, not just to exercise your power, but to actually explain and perhaps even persuade members of the community. So thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Any other comments? All right, as it stands,
I
the
would
committee
say
had-
that's fair, and I appreciate that, Peter, and there's always opportunities to explain ourselves. It's one thing to just vote, but I highly encourage everyone on that council to explain. And we're not going to always agree on everything, but you are owed an explanation. So I think that's fair, and I'm going to, encourage that.
Thank you, Katie. I think that's very helpful. Any other comments? And Peter, thank you for that. That was very clarifying. Much appreciated.
A question.
Yes, Elizabeth.
Could you explain, I mean, last year's election, was that phrase in the regulations?
It was not in what the committee set forward. It was in what we got back from the council without explanation. That phrase
No.
had been deleted.
But I'm
So-
saying the phrase was in the regulations before.
No, it
So
was
that-
it was in what the committee had suggested, the council had removed it.
It was in previous years. and
Well, it was
had been
implied
removed.
in previous years. We didn't have as clear a paragraph as this section, paragraph 2 here. In the
Uh-huh.
previous regs, I went back and looked at 22 and 23. It wasn't as clear. It was certainly implicit. But I
Mhm.
think one of the nice things that last year's committee did was when they cleaned up all 5 sets of regulations from 2023 that had been approved by the council, they consolidated the duties of the election committee in this one paragraph. And that was one of the duties that they put in because it is a pretty material component of managing the elections. And then the council took it out without explanation. And so we operated without that phrase last year. But as I said, Michael and I coordinated pretty well, and we did not have any problems of the contractor not meeting the regs, as opposed to 2023, when presumably the manager was coordinating with or without the committee's input. And that was when they didn't do the contractor did not meet the regulation that said they had to do postal tracking, and previously they didn't meet the regulation that said you had to have postage on the return envelopes. I mean, there have been a number of issues in terms of the contractor's performance being supervised adequately until last year when Michael and I coordinated the process together, as it says here, coordinate and direct the contractor.
Okay,
That certainly seems to me to fall well within the responsibilities of the election committee, because we're supposed to manage the elections.
right.
Other comments, questions? All right, we've had a committee vote to reinsert that phrase, and we've had a commitment from our council chair for an explanation as to why it might be not approved by the council. Our obligation, as Larry pointed out earlier, is to recommend what we think are fair and appropriate regulations. We have as a legal body constituted by the charter, we have a responsibility to do our best job to make sure we have clear and ethical regulations. All right, moving on
Well,
to
there's-
section 3, unless
me,
there's
wait a minute,
anything
Marty.
else. Yes, go ahead.
Marty.
Member of the village wanted to make
okay, there's somebody's hand raised.
Oh,
Oh, sorry, go ahead. Susan, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I was just thinking, maybe if there's a concern that one, like maybe the village manager might, okay, if you say that the committee is responsible for coordinating, communicating with the vendor or something, could something be put there to assure people that you're not like going off, the rails or something, in the sense of like, including the village manager in those communications? In other words, every effort will be made to CC. We will do this in close coordination with the village manager to ensure that, I don't know, something about ensuring that the communications are understood both by the village as well as the committee. Every effort will be made by the committee to include in the loop of communication, the village manager. You see what
Yeah.
I'm saying? Like CC him, because you're already doing that, but by stating it, I think it would give some assurance to people who are concerned that, oh, what if this is a rogue committee this year? Well, other people might go, well, what if it's a rogue manager the next year? And what if it's a rogue council that, encourages the rogue manager, the manager to do something. And, it's supposed to be run independently. These elections are supposed to be run independently by the committee. But maybe there could just be an assurance both ways, in the sense that we could, just have some little language there about being sure to include them in the loop of communication, the manager.
I think that's a good suggestion. Larry, to you.
Yeah, I don't know if that's gonna work. The issue is that, Katie, I want to ask you a question. Perhaps it would help if we prepared or gave to the council a list of the occasions where the council insisted that the village manager conduct these things, and it was done inappropriately on many, many occasions. Not because necessarily anyone was deliberately trying to do things, but because they don't realize the bias, or they don't realize the degree of which it should be done, etc. I mean, the whole purpose of the election committee is to know these things and to understand very specifically how they're done. So I'm asking you, do you feel you might benefit for the council members to see how not putting this in has actually harmed our elections?
Well, I'm just sorry, Larry. How so? What is this list? Is this going to come from the election committee, and what are the instances, or
Yeah, we'll prepare a
what
list.
are you citing? Yeah.
We'll prepare a list how, for example, instructions were given to not send out a notice that is required, but the at-will village manager had to follow the instructions of a council and actually didn't do what is required. And that wouldn't have happened if the responsibilities and control was left with the election committee, which is exactly what we're pointing out. There have been numerous occasions where this has happened. There have been occasions where a notification about new candidates and who they were never went out, and that damaged their ability to be even considered, as an example. That's why it's worded this way. Okay, so if there's an opposition to this idea, okay, this isn't about, the council has the power to say, we want the best, fairest elections possible. If these provide it, then let's do it. It's not an explanation about if anybody's rogue. I mean, all of us could be rogue, okay? God knows my wife tells me I'm rogue all the time. So the deal is that trying to make that come in as a boogeyman or concern is not valid. If people are going to do things wrong, there's other measures that can be taken to that. But the fact is, you make it absolutely clear. If the village manager isn't doing these things, and he's not sure what to do necessarily, he or she, and then it turns around, calls up council members, says, how should I handle this? No, okay, neither one of them should be involved because they're both biased.
I understand, Larry, and well, ideally, no one should be going rogue. Period.
Agree with that.
But I work closely with Michael, even more so this year. I have full faith in Michael, and Michael considers himself your employee, the people's employee, as much as he works with the council. So there is no bias, in my opinion, there. But
Michael does not have the right that you just expressed. He is at the request of the council members at will. If they tell him to do something, then he, in good integrity, has to do it. And there have been instances where council members have instructed the village manager to do things that are not to these regulations and actually harmed the candidates that were not known.
Larry, I want to
I'm
correct
trying to
two
explain to you.
things.
Wait a minute, Arthur, don't interrupt. So the fact here is that this wording makes it clear. I'm sorry, he is a at-will employee of a council with a they're not a disinterested party. They are, at least 2 or 3 of them are running. And that's the, have you ever, I mean, nobody else runs an election like that.
Larry,
Ridiculous.
the manager is hired by the village. He's a village employee
Mhm.
and not the council. And
Mhm.
a second is that each one of the election committee members are serving at will by of the council. They can be dismissed as easily as, or probably more easily than a manager can be.
You want to do that,
The
Arthur, go
at-will
ahead.
notion is not definitive here.
Well, just think about what you've just said. First off, I think that's actually not as simple as you're laying it out, and I don't think it's accurate. But number 2, think of how many election committee members have resigned because of what you're doing here is unethical.
Wait,
These are people with.
I'm trying to
good,
think of
honest-
something. Go ahead.
these are-
Peter
these
Kahn's
people
hand is
with-
up.
These are people with good, honest intentions who realize how biased and incorrect it is.
Let me go from you, Larry, to Peter Kahn. Peter, you're on. Thank you. Unmute
Let
yourself.
me push all these little buttons. Yeah, I just wanted to speak to the point that Susan raised, which I must say I disagree with. And for the reason that I think it proves too much, that if it were necessary to have the village manager supervise this particular action by the election committee, you have to wonder why it is that he doesn't have the right to supervise and ensure the fairness of everything that the village, that the election committee does. And so by that argument, you could have the village manager working jointly with the election committee on every aspect of the election. And that's just ridiculous. That offers many opportunities for unfairness and for interference in the efforts of the committee to be unbiased. And, you can argue that he's an employee of the village, but it's the council that has the power to hire and fire. It's not me, it's not any one of us, it's the council.
Exactly.
Members of the council have an obvious bias in this,
Yeah.
and.
And you know that, Arthur.
Yeah, okay, well, thank you.
Let me simply add there that we have had in the past instances where village managers were in fact very clearly not disinterested parties in an election. Arthur, you'll recall, and Katie, you may too, the election of 2015, where the then village manager, she knew her job was on the line, depending on, there were, I think, 6 or 8 candidates running that year. And the village manager knew that whichever slate won, she'd either have a job or not. And in that case, the village manager had an obvious self-interest in the election herself. It wasn't just that she had responded to the council members who were running for election. She had a personal self-interest in the outcome of that election, which is another reason why the village manager probably should just be, it shouldn't touch the election process with a 10-foot pole.
Right. And
And-
it shouldn't be that we base our decisions on the integrity of Michael. I mean, everybody loves Michael, me too, and he's got a lot of integrity, but he's not going to be there forever. Okay, and these are for future managers and future council members to follow. It has nothing to do with an individual person presently. Oh, he's going to do it right, so that's okay. That's not how you write regulations and laws.
The regulations should be robust in the sense of they should be so clear, and the responsibility should be assigned so clearly that, somebody walking in off the street 5 years from now would know exactly what to do. And the intermingling of the village staff with he's not a member of the election committee, and there's nothing that gives him authority to manage the elections. That's not in his job description. It's in our job description as a committee. And I think the charter set that up separately, quite deliberately, to make sure that where a manager had self-interest in the outcome of an election, or was reporting to incumbents who obviously have a self-interest in the outcome of the election, that you don't get undue interference or even delays, because even delaying an election instruction to the contractor can screw up an election. I mean, the timeline here, as Elizabeth said earlier, is pretty tight and pretty precise, and delays can affect the outcome of election. It's not just if he forgets to tell him to do something. If he's sick, out for a week, or he's too busy with a sidewalk project. There are lots of reasons to really be very concerned about inserting the village staff into the election management process. Certainly, they
Marty,
provide.
Marty, can I suggest that we can cut according to the charter, the committee shall operate according to rules and procedures adopted by the council. You will submit your ideas to the council will act on it, and then we'll be on with it. So I don't think, to my mind, this doesn't deserve further discussion at this point.
Well, it's committee's discussion. Thank you, Arthur, for
Right.
your perspective on that. I think the committee needs to discuss this till we're satisfied that we all have clarity on it. And
You may
that
have
is-
noticed Paul Weller has joined the conversation.
yes, Paul, would you like to add anything? We're talking about not having the manager be the middleman in the committee's coordination with the contractor who issues the ballots, et cetera. Paul, welcome aboard, and unmute yourself, and if you'd like to chime in, you're welcome to. Paul? Okay, well, we can come back to you if you like. Do any of the committee members have anything else to add? This has been a very, I think, illuminating discussion and very helpful in some very practical ways. Anybody else want to add before we move on?
Tell him Paul just unmuted himself.
Okay, Paul, can you hear me?
I-
Paul Weller?
Yeah, I got it off.
Hi.
I think it should be, I think the committee directly with the contractor. That's my point.
That's what we had previously proposed, and then the council changed it last year. But the committee now thinks it should be that way again this year too. So you're agreeing with the committee here?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Good.
Paul, what was you were involved in writing the original charter, weren't you?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Did you work on writing the village charter?
Yes, yeah.
And what was the intent for at that time?
You mean what, going directly with the contractors?
Well,
Yeah,
about
I
the
mean-
independence. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought the idea here was that the election committee should, be running the elections to ensure that there was no bias and stuff.
As an independent group, yeah. I think that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you would know, Paul, since you wrote that part of the charter. So thank you for weighing in here. It's very helpful. Anyone else want to contribute on this discussion? It is a core issue, and it's come up every year since 2020. Prior to that, the staff really didn't touch the village election process with a 10-foot pole. I had a conversation with Jean, who was the village manager for many years prior to that. And she went back through the records going back as far as she could to 2007 or 5 or something like that. She said there is no record of the village manager being in the middle of the election operations process like this, going as far back as she knows.
That's as far as I know, that's correct, yeah.
Okay, thank you, Paul, for confirming that. And I appreciated Jean looking at her files. So again, the village staff performs a very important administrative support function. Back when we did in-person elections, they were the ones who set up the tables for us and all that. But they had not traditionally been involved in any way in instructions to a contractor on election materials or issuing ballots or anything of substance like that. It was strictly administrative or support, which we still, I mean, like posting our announcements. And again, Michael did a beautiful job of that last year. And, but that hasn't always been the case in the past. And so it's really important to have them in the support function, to have the staff in that support function for the committee. Arthur, as you said, he does work for the village. But that's different than putting him into the actual management of the elections per se. All right, anyone want to add anything further on that? Yes, Peter.
Yes. We have been talking about this issue for a number of years, back and forth, and the council has always insisted repeatedly during the entire time that I've been in any way involved with this, with the committee or with just watching the process of the elections. And in this process, the council has always taken the position that it holds now. And yet it has never, to my knowledge, offered to the village any explanation whatever of its concern, why it is that the village council, that the council staff or the village staff has to be inserted in the middle of this, and yet it has insisted upon it. And I believe that the village council owes an explanation to the community as to why this is so important to them, that the village staff be inserted into the middle of the operations of the election committee. And I would appreciate it very much. I think we would all feel much better if you could give us a cogent and understandable explanation of what your concerns are that require this particular action. So I'm looking forward to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Anyone else? All right, that was
Now,
a very,
I'd like to say something also.
yes, go ahead.
Following up on what Peter said, I think there's an element of trust that's very important. And so I mean, obviously the council would have to trust that once these very detailed, elaborate instructions are approved and these rules, that the committee then has the authority to carry them out and trust that they will do their job. So, I mean, to me, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to have to run everything back and forth on every decision in such a highly procedural matter, you know, stepwise rules process like that's described here. I mean, it's just dizzying to think about that and the implications of it. So to me, it's an issue of trust. And I agree with Peter. If they don't trust the election committee to do that well and responsibly, why not? You know, what's the issue? Because we could ask how other jurisdictions handle it. How does the state handle it? Are there administrators on the backs of the electors in the elections process that we just went through? I probably doubt that. Probably people take an oath to carry out their duties and to promise to do it ethically. So you've got to have confidence in the people that, you know, have, in this case, volunteered their time and talents to do just that.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I think that's an important issue, and I would say I'm quite familiar with the county board of elections, and they are absolutely independent. I mean, there is no question that it would be considered election interference if some employee, however well-intentioned, of any council member on the county council were to try to insert himself or herself into the county board of elections procedural, mechanics. I mean, that would be a violation that I'm sure the county board of elections would report, to the county ethics officer. It would just be like so out of bounds. That's why the county has a separate board of elections. And I did look at a number of our neighboring jurisdictions, and almost all of them have a separate board of elections committee or commissioners or whatever. But I mean, it's not universal. There are places that run it like a sixth grade class president, election where the council members and the village manager are like knee deep in election. But I can only find one of those, very small town. And the standard practice is very much the opposite, which is what Martin's Additions had for all those years, where the council approves the regs, but then the council and the staff stay hands off. That is absolutely the norm, and that is certainly the standard at the county level. That's why the county has a separate board of elections. So, just to say, what the best practices here are. And again, that's part of our job as a committee, is to advise the council on best practices. And on that note, anything else? Anyone else want to contribute? Okay. All right, let's move along here. We don't have a whole lot of changes or suggested markups here. I'm looking at section 3, general provisions. And there, Arthur and Katie, just a note to you, in number 2, paragraph 2 under general provisions, if you have the document in front of you, there's a requirement that the committee, no less than 6 months before election day, will submit the proposed schedule for the election. And we did that in October. That's in your inbox still at the council level. Katie, yeah, we would like the council to vote to approve that schedule, if you can, in December, so that we can proceed with our planning on the committee level. But we got it in on time, and so you have that. Arthur, I don't care. Katie, do you want to say anything about the schedule?
Looks good to me.
You. And we got it in plenty of time. We got it due early. Sort of proud of that. All right. Anything else in section 3, paragraph 1, 2, 3, 4? I had no changes until you get down to paragraph 7. And this is something we already voted on about changing the may to a shall on the forum. And the committee voted earlier to say that the forum, in our professional opinion, as election officials, we think it has to be mandatory. So we've already voted on that may to shall in number 7. Is there any further discussion of that? Anyone? Okay. And as Elizabeth pointed out, that was discussed at the council meeting, and we appreciate you taking time to put that on the agenda back then. Okay, then we get down to number 10. And this was something that the election committee last year brought up. Number 10 says that if you have to have a runoff, it has to be within 2 weeks. And last year's committee pointed out that it's actually not physically possible to do what's said here. This is a charter requirement, that you'll have the runoff election within 2 weeks. It goes back, way back to when we used to do in-person elections. And the thing is, it's not physically possible to do a mail vote election within 2 weeks. And as a regulatory rule writer professionally, it is really not a good practice to adopt election regulations that cannot be carried out. Now, I think the issue there was that, Arthur, perhaps maybe you can elucidate this, that that would require a charter change to say you have to have 4 weeks to do a mail vote election, which is basically what you need operationally. I don't know that the committee needs to do anything with it. If it's a charter change, we cannot do a charter change. We have to have the council do a charter change. So I'm just opening it up for discussion. I mean, I'm just pointing out what last year's committee pointed out, which is that that's a regulation that no one could physically do. Comments? Thoughts?
It
Not a
could be
huge issue.
done in a direct election in a non-mail-in.
Correct. You could do an in-person election like that, but in-person elections these days are considered almost discriminatory by definition if you just have like a one evening election, because so many people are excluded by having a very short one evening, in-person election process. It just excludes too many voters. There's been a lot of developments, I guess, in the literature about fair elections and going by mail. It's much more inclusive, So presumably, and in fact, this actually says, that the runoff shall be held by mail. I mean, the committee didn't change that last year, and we haven't changed it this year. If you do a mail vote election, you need 4 weeks, because it takes at least a week for the vendor to prepare the ballots, and it may take a week for him to get to the voters by mail. Voters need to have at least a week, to respond, and then you got to mail them back. So that's 4 weeks right there.
I would suggest, I mean, we're not going to deal with this now, suggest that you recommend a charter amendment to accommodate this.
Yes, that's what the committee did last year, and I agree with that, Arthur. I think we should recommend that again this year. Committee members, you want to weigh in?
I have a
Good, go ahead.
suggestion. You could use another footnote, perhaps, that would say in the event of mail, what is it, mail-in ballots, the process requires 4 weeks or something like that.
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying? That if you wanted to account for it, so it isn't like you're doing something that isn't understood while you try to amend the charter. I mean, that would be one possibility to explain the difference between a in-person election. Well, that rule was valid for an in-person, but for mail-in vote, you know, with the evolution of time, you're now doing mailed ballots. You know, because it's not feasible, it takes 4 weeks.
Right.
It could be a footnote, possibly an explanatory note
Mhm.
to accommodate either situation.
Any comments from other members? Thank you, Elizabeth.
Yeah, well, it does bring up a question of this decision to make it, our voting process, a mail-in vote process. Is that in the charter?
No.
That's not in the charter. It's not required in the charter. It's permitted in
Right.
the charter.
Right. And so when you think about that, then maybe mandating that this is to be by mail, you see, may not meet the requirements of the charter itself. I mean, there's a lot of things about changing your method of voting that maybe we should review these things, certainly not now, but I think that one of the roles after we get done with this election, it might be is for us to look at that and see what charter changes are needed to, if we're going to go to mail-in votes as a permanent procedure.
Mm-hmm. That's a good suggestion, Larry. Anyone else want to comment on that? And Elizabeth, you know, again, this is just a weird little thing. Presumably we won't have a runoff election, so it's going to be moot. But if we had a runoff, we could initiate it right away within 2 weeks. We just couldn't complete it within 2 weeks. And we could drop a footnote for that. If the committee wants us to put a footnote there, we could drop a footnote that simply explains that this is pending further charter amendment. You know, we would initiate it as quickly as possible within 2 weeks.
Marty,
We don't need to.
Marty, I
Yeah.
think you're on solid ground there because it says there shall be a runoff election, doesn't define what an election is, that it must be completed, that all votes must be counted at a certain time. You could say a runoff election is being held within 2 weeks. Could satisfy the charter if you have a clever lawyer.
All right, well, Arthur, give me that wording again, because I didn't write that down. What it says now is that in the event of a runoff, you have to have a runoff. There shall be a runoff election within 2 weeks.
There shall
that
be a
language-
runoff election within 2 weeks. What is that? A runoff election is not defined.
Right.
What it is, when it's completed, how it occurs. So you can say, I mean, you could easily say that all the steps have been in place.
Right, maybe a runoff election should be conducted within 2
Well,
weeks.
it can't be completely conducted within 2 weeks.
Well, it didn't say completely.
It says there shall be a
Okay.
runoff election.
You think that's vague enough, Arthur, that we could start it within 2 weeks and not be in violation of this regulation?
If you hire a good lawyer.
Well, we'd have to come to the council to hire a lawyer.
I think there's enough wiggle room there.
Okay. Committee members, let's weigh in on this. How many think it's okay to leave it as is? How many people want to drop a footnote? All right. Can I see a show of hands? Drop a footnote? Okay. I see Larry's hand up, my hand's up, Nomi's hand up. Drop a footnote explaining, and Elizabeth's hand up. Okay, so we drop a footnote, and Arthur, I can include some language in the footnote along those lines that you suggested. You know, that it need not be completed
Right.
within 2 weeks. That actually, go ahead.
Are there, I'm just curious if you can tell me, who is this guy Shelby that you keep talking about?
Shelby. Oh, shall be. Right, shall be.
Within 2 weeks. Okay, I got notes on that. And Elizabeth, I know you're taking the minutes here too. Okay. Next we're to something where I want to thank the council because the council made 2 improvements in the regs they gave us last January. One of which was very nice to make the Dropbox mandatory. Thank you for doing that in September. And the other was this, to take the recommendation from last year's committee that we include a recount provision, just not to leave it arbitrary, as to when a recount was allowed. And last year's committee had recommended a very straightforward version of that, which says that if the margin is 10 votes or fewer, the losing candidate can request and get a recount. And then the council came back to us in September to say that they didn't want to use the simple 10 vote margin. They wanted us to use the state regs, which go on for 4 single-space pages. As you remember, they were in an earlier committee packet for us to all review. And it says basically that if the margin is no more than 5% of the total votes for those 2 candidates calculated in accordance with the formula in the state regs. And that's a more complicated process. Susan, you need to mute yourself. Susan, you're echoing.
Susan, I'm muting you.
All right. Susan, go use Peter's computer if you would. All right, so we have 2 versions here, and the committee needs to vote on which version we recommend. We can also include both of them in the regs we send forward and give the council the choice. So which do we? My recommendation to us as a committee would be that we should let the council know which one we think is better, and then leave the final choice to them. Either one is workable. One is just a lot clearer than the other. Elizabeth, you had, I think, a note on that.
Yeah. Well, the state regs would work when you, I mean, there's a population size difference. So I think this would come down to kind of an efficiency, a practical issue that the voting population in Martin's Additions is obviously much smaller than the state of Maryland. So the issue was, do we need something as complicated as that, or would a simple number as the option A, which says
10
the
votes.
margin, yeah, 10 votes different. If it's within 10 votes, you have a recount. You know, I mean, that's what it comes down to for me, is would be the size, because we're a much smaller population, and therefore it would be easier for the committee to conduct, or less complicated than going through all of these elaborate formulas. I mean, you know, the other might be overkill. That was the thinking there.
Katie or Arthur, oh, I see Larry's got a hand up. Go ahead, Larry.
Yeah, and I also think that it's well within our budget and our capability without it's not arduous at all for us to do a recount. It's a very simple, pragmatic thing to do. So, you know, I mean, there was some ideas about, gee, this is going to make it more difficult. No, it isn't. It's not really that difficult. So
Well,
that's my
yeah.
opinion.
Elizabeth?
Well, the issue wasn't whether we do the recount, though, was it? It was just, what's the margin going to be?
Right, that we needed a
Yeah.
procedure, not to leave it open and arbitrary.
Right.
You know, just to define, you know, what the rule is on recounts, and that either one of these defines a rule, which makes me happy, because not having a rule was what made me unhappy last year. I didn't want to just leave it all loosey-goosey, because then the election committee and the council could be criticized if they refuse to do a recount. You know, if there's no rule that says when you have to, there's no rule that says when you can't. Anyway, yes, any other comments on this? Nomi, any thoughts?
I'm not sure I can add it to anybody who's already spoken.
Okay. My thought is simply simpler is better. When you write regulations, you want them to be clear and understandable to the candidates, to the public, and of course to future election committees. So I vote for simpler is better. Do we have a motion to recommend option A and present both option A and B? All right, Larry so moves. Is there a second?
Well, wait a minute.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. I thought you were
I'm
moving.
unclear what you said.
All right, I think that what the committee can do here most usefully is to recommend that our preference, our recommendation is to go with option A, the simpler version, but to present both to the committee, to the council, and let the council decide whether it wants option A or B. But to express a preference that we don't think they're equal options, that we think option A is better because it's simpler. Peter Kahn, you have a hand up? No. Okay. All right. So Do we move to present both or just one? I would say we present both, let the council pick,
All
but
right,
make express, but
okay,
ex-
yeah, I move that.
yeah, move to present both, let the council pick, but make it clear we think A is the better option. All in favor of that? Was there a second to that motion? Elizabeth seconds it. All in favor of presenting both, but expressing our opinion that option A is preferable, please say aye.
I,
Aye, okay, that's a 4-0 vote. All right. All right, going on, I had no changes on the next page, I don't believe. Let me see if I have anything here. Yeah, okay. On section 4, qualified voters who could vote, I had no changes. Anybody got any changes on that section? Okay, no amendments. Okay, sorry, my dog is speaking up here. On the village voter roll, section 5. No changes in section 5 unless anybody wants to do something now. All right. On procedure for voting. All right, if you go to the next comment I had from somebody was in paragraph number 2. This is Roman numeral 6, procedure for voting, paragraph 2. On election day, the word may comes out and says shall provide an opportunity for voters to drop off their completed ballot envelopes in a secure drop box. That's one of the changes the council has already made and approved. And I think all the committee needs to do is say thank you, because that was what we recommended. Any other comments on that? Okay, nothing on paragraph 3. On paragraph 4, we start getting into that business, which is in here so many places, where instead of saying the council shall direct the contractor to mail the ballot package to the voters, it says the council will direct the manager to instruct my dog is commenting, forgive me. Anyway, that's the first place where it starts out. Inserting the manager, as we've already discussed, and then the manager is inserted in many more places. I'm gonna mute myself for a second to deal with my dog. I'll be right back. My apologies, I'm back. Okay. On this next section, the only changes that I have marked from any of our committee members on the entire remainder of this regulatory document are in fact this same phrase. And where it says, instead of the committee shall direct the contractor to do XYZ, it says in all these different places, the committee shall direct the manager to direct the contractor. We've already discussed this at length, and I think in some very substantive ways. I think that we can handle this efficiently, since time is precious, by simply saying, having the committee vote whether we want to include that phrase, the committee shall instruct the manager to instruct the contractor in all the following places where it appears, or remove it. That's a simple up and down vote, and it's the fastest way I could think of to handle what is really a very repetitive issue. Nomi?
I agree.
Larry?
I agree.
Elizabeth?
Agree.
All right,
It-
let's have a motion.
I think you said it was 14 times it appeared.
Yeah, I could have been off in my count. It appears quite frequently, but it's exactly the same phrase in each place. And we need a motion, if the committee so wishes, that to delete that phrase and simply have the committee shall direct the contractor to XYZ in all the places where it appears from section 6, paragraph 4 onward. All right, if someone would like to make that motion?
I
Naomi-
move.
Yeah. I
Nomi
second.
moves. Larry seconds. All in favor of striking that language, please say aye.
Aye.
I,
I,
All right, that's a unanimous vote by the committee, 4-0. And I will send you again the markup with that change in it. And we will obviously present a document, a report to the council, explaining why we think that is important and asking for an explanation of why they think it's important not to strike that. When we present the regs to the council for the December meeting. And I'm looking to see if there's any other markups I have here, anywhere in this draft. Does anybody else have anything else?
Well, I'm not sure if it is. What about under electioneering?
Under electioneering, what was your question there? That
Was
is,
there anything, was there any change?
section 13. All right, it's a couple pages on, section 13.
Yeah, this is not a Mel Brooks movie, so couldn't you have just said 1-3 instead of XIII?
I accept movie criticism.
So, yeah, anyway, I may have said something to you this afternoon about this, but I think that whole wording is a little off.
All
I
right, what
don't
would
know
you,
that
what
we
would you
need
like
to
to?
do anything about it this year? Maybe we could look at it after the election's done and see how to better word that.
Which section are you concerned about, Larry?
5.
We talked about section 5, about enforcing a reasonable no election zeroings around the election table.
Right.
Do you think that was too small a zone?
Well, it doesn't express things properly. There's a table where the ballots are, but there's also, it's supposed to be a secret vote. And so there has to be privacy boosts and stuff too. So.
Well, yeah, I see where you're going. There was
you
an issue
understand?
some
And-
years
and
back.
So if these are just for mail-in ballots, they're filled out, brought and put in the box, that's one thing, okay?
That's what we've
Yeah.
actually got here.
However, we haven't actually said that we're only gonna have mail-in ballots.
We do. The
Where?
procedure for voting, number 6, section Roman numeral 6, procedure for voting, says in paragraph 1, VMA's elections will normally be held by mail, entirely by mail. Other methods may be adopted in the future, subject to council approval.
And
Right,
that does
so-
not require a charter amendment.
Nope, the charter allows that.
Okay, fine.
So,
Then I
Yeah.
think you just leave it as it is then, referring to the ballot box.
right, because it's a drop box where you put your sealed envelope in, so
Right.
not an issue of voting privacy.
Right.
Nomi, you had a question that you raised with me earlier about the early ballots language, where there was a may and a shall. Do you remember that?
I don't
Which-
remember.
Yeah, what
Yeah.
section is that? Where are you?
I'm looking for it.
I don't see it.
Yeah, I thought I'd circled it, but
It may have been Elizabeth, because she was really into early voting.
right, yeah, and early voting is important. It's actually a fairly significant voting right. That I can tell you that the committee has, even in our pre-mail vote days, back in the old days, we were doing it in person, that we always provided early ballots, that, via absentee ballots. Let's see. It might be in the instructions to the contractor section for that.
So just,
Yeah. All right, go to section 10, instructions for the mail vote election contractor. All right, go to number 7, paragraph number 7, under that, early ballots. It says that the committee may instruct, the contractor to issue early ballots. And I think that whoever raised it with me was probably right, because they said it might want to be shall. Again,
Yes,
it's some-
that's the one I thought should be shall. Yes.
All right, so we need a committee vote on that, if you all want to say we shall. Again, it is normally a standard part of elections that you issue early ballots.
well, not.
That should not be optional.
Yeah, well, I'm kind of getting stupid about this. What's the timing between the forum and the normal first opportunity to vote?
Okay, the requirements here in this set of regulations are that the contractor mails out the ballot packets the day after you hold the forum. The forum needs to be at least 2 weeks before Election Day, so that
Okay.
people have their ballots for at least a week, assuming a week in the mail,
Alright.
that they can do a sealed ballot into the drop box on Election Day, which is May 6th, I think, this year. Now, people who are not going to be in town in time to receive their ballots during that period still have a right to vote. And again, traditionally, historically, those early ballots have been issued as far back as Gene Sperling and I can remember.
How does that work? Explain it. Tell me.
In an in-person election, you have an election day where you have the in-person election. Anybody who can't be there on that day can, several weeks beforehand, ask for an absentee ballot, which we deliver as fast as we could.
Right, but now in the mail-in sequence, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the form occurs, now he has 2 weeks to get out the ballots, the ballot package, is that
No,
right?
the contractor has to mail the ballot packets the day after the form, right away.
So then how do you do an early?
You
Listen.
can, on request, a voter who's not going to be in the country, say, during that period when the ballots mailings arrive at the village, can request from the committee. This is not something new this year. This is something that's been in the regs for a couple of years now. Can, in fact, request the committee to have the contractor send them their ballot early. Now, there's a operational limit on that because we, as a committee, send the voter roll to the contractor on April 7th. That's our deadline, by April 7th. And the forum is usually around April 20th. And then Election Day is like May 6th. So there's a real timing sequence to this. Goes back to Elizabeth's point about some precision here in terms of
Yeah,
timing and carrying out this process. What happened last year, and as far as I know, in the 2 preceding years, was that people did request early ballots, only 2 or 3 last year. And the contractor had the voter roll and was able to start printing the ballots right away.
okay.
And the
So he
committee,
can do that.
the
Oh, all right,
contractor can
cool.
commit the
All
ballot.
right, well, that's, yeah, okay, there it is. Okay, great.
We couldn't issue an early ballot in January. We can't do it till
Right,
after we
right,
give
but-
the
But
voter
you
roll.
can issue an early ballot, and he's done it before.
Yes, sir. That's exactly right.
Okay, great.
Elizabeth, you know me? Elizabeth, go ahead.
I was just going to add that we did that, my husband and I, for two times. I remember it wasn't last year, but when we always left for Italy on the 5th of May or something, and we missed the date by just a few days. So in those cases, the election chairperson brought the ballots that he'd gotten from the contractor that, we were already registered. They all had the numbers on them and everything. He brought them to our home, and we've completed them and sealed them and put them in the post office before we left, but it wasn't way ahead. Obviously, it was after
Right.
those preliminary steps had been done. But yeah, we were examples of that twice. Did
So
it work?
Marty, what is, so with this document, what is it that we need to change?
We don't need to change anything there except the word may to shall. Shall is a requirement that the committee shall provide early ballots. And may leaves it kind of wishy-washy, like maybe we could decide, no, we're not going to let people vote this year if they're not here on time.
Okay, well, I think it should stay with shall.
I think it should say shall too. Let's have a motion. Would you like to move that it should say shall?
Okay, seashells, not the seashore.
Yes, Larry. Is there a second for Larry's motion that it should say
I
shall?
second it.
All right, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, that's a 4-0 vote. We changed the may to shall there. And we are almost done, folks, and you have been wonderfully patient and helpful in working through this. It is a complex process and it needs to be done, correctly. I mean, it really does matter. We're looking at electing people who are going to be responsible for steering this village through the whole zoning thing that's coming at us and are responsible for what, $7 million, $8 million in public money. I mean, this is a serious election, and these council members, as Arthur and Katie know well, have a lot of serious responsibilities, and so the election needs to be really, I think, done done as well as we can recommend. And I had nothing else here, which brings us to our final vote. Arthur and Katie, you'll both remember that last year's committee in February, Arthur, it was at your request, put together a list of 9 items for future council consideration.
Right.
And we've dealt with some of them. I just pulled up that list. It was in the February committee report from last year's committee, had 9 items on it. The first one was to establish a reasonable procedure for recounts. We've done that. Number 8 was to reinstate the mandatory drop box. Thank you to the council for doing that one. Number 9 was to update the regs to reinstate the mandatory election form. The committee has now voted unanimously twice to make it mandatory, both at last month's meeting and now officially tonight. So let's go to the other items. Number 2 was to include a reasonable procedure for referendums in the election regulations. And the council did not include that last year. The question is this year, does this year's committee want to include it this year? Number 3 was update section 602 to provide a workable 4-week time frame for a runoff election. We talked about that earlier. Number 4 was update section 602 to provide for a minimum of 5 members on the election committee. Again, that requires a council. The council said that required a charter amendment. We had said 5, but again, everybody knows we need at least 4 or 5 members under the OMA. So that's a standing recommendation. It should be at least 5 to work better. Number 5 on the list was update the charter to provide the election cycle to begin 75 days, not 60 days before election day. The 60-day language dates back to the previous system of holding in-person elections. It was too short even then, and it's way too short for mail vote elections. But nothing in the charter prevents us from starting 75 days before election day, which is what, in fact, we've been doing for years in more institutions. And what these regs that we just went through say, 75 days, that's consistent with the charter. The charter says no less than 60 days. Number 6 was to remove the phrase that authorizes canceling some elections. That's in the charter. It's not in this set of regulations anywhere. And that was an objection that people had because there's no need to cancel an election when you can hold them by mail. And number 7 was clarify the separation of the election management process in the regulations. The charter assigns that function to the election committee to separate the council members and staff from operating the election mechanics. And it goes on to say, council strictly enforced the separation for 35 years from 85 to 2020. And again, Gene Sperling and Paul Weller both confirmed that this evening, or Gene this afternoon, and Paul tonight at our meeting. And the county government has a separate county board of elections for the same reasons. The board of elections, not the county council staff, operates the Montgomery County elections. So my question here is does this committee this year want to concur with the 9 items that were recommended by the committee last year? And I think we could probably do that in an up and down altogether vote if you want to do it that way. Nomi, what do you think?
I have to think about it for a second.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else want to chime in?
Yeah, so Marty, I'm trying to find that document.
I sent it to you again in an email this afternoon. It was in the earlier packet.
What was it called?
The email was vote on this evening. Yeah, with a question mark, asking if you wanted to vote on this evening.
Katie, you could make this a lot easier if you did what you did last time, and not in addition to cookies, if you could have provided coffee for all of us right now. it would make
I
a
know.
big difference.
I know. We're almost done, team. We're almost done.
Yeah, I just I don't have the document, so
Go
I
back to your email.
I don't have it either. Right. I remember reading it maybe a couple weeks ago, but I didn't see it come in today. Again, Marty, and it just seems to me that since you went through it quickly and some of those things have been taken care of, but some of them haven't, or some are still good ideas, that maybe we need to look at that and it apart and maybe send our comments and include that with whatever goes forward to the next meeting.
Mhm. Yeah, I sent it this afternoon, a little after 5 to everybody. Again, you're right, Elizabeth, it was an earlier packet.
Yeah,
And if you can see it, it says also for our vote this evening.
yeah. Didn't see it.
And-
Okay,
Okay.
sorry. So,
Okay. if you want to take a minute to look at it now, again, you all had it in the earlier packet, and the council has had it. I know, it doesn't really help if you don't have it in front of you. Yeah, it would be a vote to basically concur with the recommendations of last year's committee. Nomi, you sent me an answer at a little after 5:56 saying yes earlier.
Right, I recall that, so I do say yes, I do.
Okay, and if you could, Elizabeth and Larry, just check your emails real quick. I mean, it's a short list. It's only 9 items, and there are only a couple that we haven't already addressed. It's not essential that we do this. It's only essential that because this is our official meeting to vote on these things. And if we're going to send a note to the council that says we concur with these 9 recommendations, we need to vote on that tonight. We need to do that because it involves some policy issues. We need to do that in a public meeting. We can't do that vote by email. We don't do any votes by email.
Yeah, I just don't feel comfortable because I don't have the document. I can't find it.
Okay. You want me to send it to you again right now? I'll forward this to you right now. I just pulled it up. Okay, and Elizabeth, I'm going to send it to you as well.
Yeah, no, I've got it. I'm looking at it.
Okay, good. And Larry, I just sent it to you.
But some of those have already been adopted, no? Like number 8, the mandatory.
Number 1 and number 8 have already been dealt with.
Yes.
And we approved number 9, which is making the election form mandatory. So those 3 have been taken care of.
So what would you do? You would submit it saying that these have been accomplished, or these have been dealt with, or whatever?
Yeah, exactly.
And that the
we,
others,
are pending. Most of the others require,
some kind of change to the charter or something.
Right, exactly. But that we concur with what last year's committee recommended.
Yes, okay.
And
Yeah.
if we don't, that's fine too.
Okay, I'll go along with that now that I've had a chance to look at it.
Yeah, and so which of these are we looking at that are haven't been taken care of? Which number?
Okay, number 2,
Okay,
procedure for referendums.
yeah,
Number
that's fine.
3, workable 4-week frame for the runoffs. We talked
Okay.
about dealing with that this year with a footnote, which we can do.
Right. Yeah.
Number 4, specify a minimum of 5 members on
I
the
agree
election
with that,
committee.
absolutely, yeah.
Yep.
Right.
And charter currently says 3, but under the OMA, 3 doesn't work. Number 5 here, provide for the cycle to begin 75 days, not 60 days
Yeah.
before election day. And again, we can work with that because we have 75 days in the regs,
Right.
but the charter should be corrected. And number 6, there's that during the pandemic, the council changed the charter to authorize them to give them the power to cancel some elections under certain
Right.
circumstances. They can't just randomly cancel elections.
Right.
It was a limited authority. But there were some objections at the time and have been ever since because there's no reason to ever cancel elections when you can
All
do
right,
them
so
by
I'm
mail.
comfortable. I'll go along with it also, yes.
Okay, we need a motion then that we concur with the recommendations of the 2024 election committee in February 2024.
I move.
All right, we have a second?
Second.
We have a second? No second?
Yeah,
Yeah, I
Elizabeth
second.
seconded.
Oh,
Sorry.
Elizabeth second.
Yeah,
Okay, good.
I second, sorry. I
All
was in-
right, all in favor of including a note that we concur with these recommendations from last year, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? No. Okay, 4-0 vote. And again, I think it's important to, keep these sort of on the burner, not the front burner necessarily, but they are pretty important election issues. Anything else from anyone else? Okay, this is terrific. You guys have really just been yeomen about going through this. Let's see. In terms of any other comments, questions, or suggestions, anybody, including
Right.
Paul Weller, Anyone else? Okay, again, Susan and Peter Kahn, thank you all for being here. The next item on the agenda is committee assignments. And our assignment will be for me to take the notes that Elizabeth has put together this evening and get you guys a draft to sign off on administratively to us to send to the council. I'll also draft up the accompanying committee report for you to approve. And the next step is after that to send it to the council no later than the 9th for their meeting on the 12th. And our next meetings will be, let's set our agenda right now. Our next meeting, we've been meeting on the first Monday of each month. January 6th would be our next meeting. And then the first Monday in February would be, let me pull up my calendar here, is the 3rd of February. Are those two dates good for everybody?
Yeah.
January
Yeah.
6th is good for me, but not not February.
Not February 3rd?
Right.
Can you do any time that first week of February?
Nah, not so much, not in February, no.
Okay, we will miss you at that meeting. The March meeting would be March 3rd. Again, the first Monday of the month. Does that look okay for people?
I think so.
Yeah, I'll have to check. I think so, but I'll check and let you know if it isn't.
Okay, yeah, that's far enough out. In the meantime, we've agreed to schedule our next meeting on January 6th
30.
and February 3rd, but we will miss our beloved Nomi.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, now the final thing we need to do is to have a final overall vote. You know, we voted on this entire election regs document section by section, and we voted on the concurrence with the last year's recommendations about those charter changes, the things that we didn't deal with tonight already. So that's done. Last thing we need to do is an overall vote that we approve the proposed 2025 VMA election regulations as amended by our committee votes this evening. So we need a motion to do that, and then we can wrap it up. Is there a motion to approve the amended regulations per the committee votes this evening? All in favor? Well, first, is there a motion? Anyone so move?
I make a motion.
Okay, a second? Larry seconding. All in favor of approving the overall amended regulations per the committee votes this evening, please say aye.
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 Okay, the overall package of regulations is now approved. And again, the next step is to give you the markups and do a final administrative review just to make sure I didn't get anything wrong. We can do that by email because that's administrative. We've done all the policy discussions here tonight in public, in meetings, as the OMA requires, and submitted to the council. And the council has tentatively agreed, and again, thank you to Katie and Arthur both. It would be immensely helpful if the council has any concerns about any of these changes that were made, that they let us know as a courtesy and to just be collegial and helpful by December 20th. That would be tremendously helpful. And Katie, thank you for encouraging that. Arthur, thank you for encouraging that. We want to keep this not controversial. I think we're all exhausted by election controversy. Any final thoughts from you, Katie?
No, none for me.
Well, thank you for staying with us through this detailed process that we need to go through. But I think the committee, as you know, is very committed to really doing the best job we can and being very thorough and meticulous.
Okay.
Arthur?
Nothing further. No, thank you.
Okay, thank you both for, Arthur, thank you for being our Zoom master, and thank you both for taking the time this evening to go through this process with us. I think it helped to discuss our reasoning, and I would only close by saying that I appreciate your affirmative response to Peter Kahn's request for explanations if you don't accept the committee's recommendations on something, because we really are trying to do our best here. And
Okay.
let me just close by saying I think we all have the same goal, which to have really fair, honest, clean, transparent village elections to do the best job that we can do. And it's important. Nationally, it's important to have fair elections, and here in our little hometown, it matters too. All right. With that note, is there a motion to adjourn? Larry so moves. Is there a second?
A second.
All right. All in favor of adjourning at 9:30 p.m., please say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you again to the residents
Good
who've
night,
chimed in.
everyone.
Good night.